Okay, guys, thank you so much for coming back to the channel. I am very excited to have my guest with me today, Mary Roberts. Now, she's been on my show before, and I will link her interview before it was on my channel. It was a little bit newer, so a lot of you guys may not have watched that video, but it was an awesome conversation about her healing journey. She has been keto for, what is it, 6 years now?
6.5 years now.
And what she calls food sober, which I think is a great topic to talk about. But Mary and I have met in person, and about a year ago, she came to one of my yoga classes, which was super, super cool. And we chat a lot on Instagram, and we were chatting this week, and we're just like, oh my gosh, there's just some serious, kind of misinformation going on about the topic of eating disorders, keto and carnivore, and let's just chat it out. And
Ah, well, thanks for having me again. I'm excited.
yes, yeah, and I just love, for people who don't know your story, can you give like a brief synopsis? And again, I'll link that video below where we go really into depth on things, but just talk a little bit about your healing journey with sobriety and diabetes, everything you've been through on keto.
Okay. So, I mean, in a nutshell, I developed an eating disorder when I was a preteen. In high school, I was hospitalized for bulimia. And then after high school, I got married, had children, and year after year, my weight kept climbing. I had a very dysfunctional relationship with food. I was a binge eater mostly. I was also a chronic dieter. When I wasn't binging, I was severely restricting and in an extreme caloric deficit and trying to follow all the diet rules out there. And my weight went up and down, up and down. I never lost more than 40 pounds. That would be my threshold. And then I would, give up and, fall off the wagon, cheat, whatever you want to call it. And I would, gain all the weight back and then some. And so I pretty much, dieted and binged my way up to 260 pounds. And that was 6.5 years ago when I was found myself at age 42 with type 2 diabetes and A1C over 9. I had high blood pressure. I was on meds for that. I was on meds for the diabetes, not insulin. I took the maximum dose of metformin and was on it for over 6 years. I had psoriasis, I had sleep apnea, I had asthma and allergies, carried an inhaler from the time I was 7 years old. Haven't had to touch it once since changing the way I eat. So yeah, I mean, I had all these health problems, and I had a terrible relationship with food. I was obsessed with food, in particularly carbs and sweets, but there was nothing that I couldn't overeat. And I'll save the story for later in our conversation, but, so 6.5 years ago, a friend of mine, mentioned keto to me, and I had already been familiar with Atkins and low carb a little bit and had some success with that, but again, gained the weight back. And then when I found keto, it was a game changer for me. It really affected me in a way that other diets hadn't. I got mental clarity and was, then was able to, I had the mental wherewithal to tackle my eating disorder, to find out why do I have this problem with food? Why do I keep binging? Why do I keep overeating? Why do I think about food constantly? And so keto paved the way for me to take care of that.
Yeah, and it's been, you've been one of the first people that I started following on my journey, because I just really related to your struggle with this whole idea of food sobriety, because so many of us come into the diet, we have that diet mentality. We've had it our whole life that, you get a cheat day, or you cheating and falling off the wagon, and that kind of thing just comes along with the territory of dieting. We don't think about it as we could just have this as a lifestyle, and maybe we just don't mess with that. As somebody, I've been very open on my channel, is that I've had a problem with alcohol, and I've had to go to meetings, and I still go to meetings, and it's something I'm actively working on every day. And coming into keto and carnivore, the carnivore space really was the first time in my life that I was I have the same problem with food. Mm-hmm. And what if I just didn't see it as an option to go and eat some ice cream if I feel like it? What if I took that off the table how would that help me mentally? So talk about that a little bit before we jump into the meat of the topic, because I just think that's so important for people to hear and understand.
Yeah. So for me, being food sober means that I don't binge, I don't eat sugar and grains, and bottom line, I don't knowingly put harmful foods into my mouth. And so for me, that means I have given up lots of different foods. And this is something like this is a concept that is difficult for a lot of people because we have this emotional attachment to food. We tie social gatherings, childhood memories, specific events to food. And so we can't, fathom in our mind, well, how would I enjoy life and do life without these things? We think that somehow life is less than or not as worthy of living if we aren't eating a lot of the stuff that we have typically eaten. And unfortunately, in the mainstream eating disorder treatment community, they don't understand addiction.
No.
They promote the idea of moderation, and it sounds so logical, right? Sounds great on the surface. Yeah, just eat everything in moderation. Well, if I was capable of moderation, I would have never been 260 pounds. I felt compelled to eat. And the reason, I mean, aside from, the emotional entanglements that we have to address, eating certain types of foods physically compelled me to want to keep eating more. And so if we don't, it's easy to, I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, like 99% is a bitch and 100% is a breeze. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
if we never introduce the offensive food, we aren't going to struggle with not eating it. Like, it is so much easier for me to abstain from something 100% than to try to control my intake.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
That's
it's,
what we say in AA is like one drink is not enough and it's too
yep,
many. And I've never just had a craving for one cupcake.
no,
I want the whole pack. I want all the cupcakes.
yeah,
Eating one cupcake sounds horrible to me. Just
right,
like having one glass of wine sounds like absolute torture. Like I would
right.
rather someone like tweeze off my toenails than to try to put myself through that, you know?
And so an example of like the extreme end on, binge eating, but there are people who are compulsive eaters too. Like there are people who they don't necessarily do what I used to do, which is eat, a dozen cupcakes in one sitting. I could totally do that, right? But there are other people who they're like, oh, well, I've never done that. So they think, oh, well, I don't have an eating disorder. But if you feel like if you get a thing of cupcakes and you eat one a day for 8 days in a row, and you every day think about, oh, I get to have my cupcake later, that's not normal. Like you are unnecessarily obsessed with the cupcakes. So even if you aren't eating them all at once, if you feel compelled to eat them day after day until they're gone, then that's an unhealthy relationship. Because we think about it and we look forward to it and we give it way more power and value than we should. So you don't necessarily have to be a binge eater to have a problem with food. There's the compulsive eating, which is where maybe you eat in regular intervals, like all day long, but you don't necessarily sit down and take in 8,000 to 10,000 calories at once. There's a spectrum of eating disorders and disordered behavior with food, and it includes like extreme fasting for the wrong purposes,
Yeah.
over exercising, anything that we do to try to undo some bad behavior that we engaged in with food is disordered. Like normal people that eat normally eat and walk away and they never think again about what they ate, and they don't think, oh, I should go for a jog, or and they don't have to plan for a cheat meal. They don't have cheat meals, they just eat normally. They're not addicted, they don't have that dysfunction with food. So
Yeah,
it's
my husband is like that. I never can understand how it's great to be married to what I call a normie.
yeah,
Because you kind of can see like, okay, people can actually do this, like not have to worry, and he'll eat his banana with almond butter and honey and stuff on it, and he's cool, but I would not go near those foods
Yeah,
because they would set something off in my mind where I become obsessed.
exactly.
Even if I was able to, quote unquote, moderate it, it would turn a switch off in my brain where it would just put it on a loop of like more banana, more honey, more almond butter, more this, more, it's like, no, I just don't even want to mess with that. So
Right.
that kind of leads me into our topic. I feel like there are a lot of people, and maybe, you can qualify this a little better than I can, because you work with people one-on-one. But there are people out there that are saying things like, the carnivore diet or the keto diet will cure your eating disorder, that's all you need to do is just follow this diet and poof,
Yeah.
magic, it's
Okay.
gone. So what?
A lot of people think it is about the food,
Yeah,
that people overeat because they just love food, which, I mean, I like food. I like the taste of food, and I particularly love the taste of sugar. Like, who doesn't really? So people think that the problem with overeating and eating disorders is the food, but it's not. And while keto definitely helped me overcome my eating disorder, it didn't in and of itself fix me. Like, it just gave me the mental sorry, you can hear my dog, he's like
that's
chewing.
okay.
It's driving me crazy. Anyway, it doesn't, like, in and of itself, like, fix us. And a lot of people say that, well, all you got to do is cut out the carbs, all you got to do is just eat only meat. And so everybody experiences a honeymoon period. Some people it's only a couple weeks, some people it's months, some people it's years. But the thing that's in common with the length of, the different lengths of the honeymoon period is that people don't, in that time period where they have changed the way they eat, they don't change the way they think about food. They don't change their relationship. They still turn to it for comfort, reward, entertainment, and they use it for reasons other than hunger. Because really, food is only to address one thing, and that is hunger. And we get hungry when we need to be nourished, and so food is supposed to nourish us. But so many of us use it, for emotional reasons. We use it to celebrate. We use it when we're sad. We use it when we're angry. We use it when we're bored. And so none of those reasons are reasons to eat. So it does, like, particularly, like, rub me wrong when I see people saying, oh yeah, all you got to do is, like, change the way you eat. Well, that's only partially true. When you remove the addictive substance, you of course start to feel better. But if you don't tackle the root of the problem, the first time that you face something really challenging, you're going to turn back to the food. And we see it happen all the time. This year in particular, like I can't
This has
say
been a
countless
stressful year.
stories
Yeah.
of people who are like, I was doing so good until I won't say the word, until the thing that happened in March, right? And
Right.
for some reason, that thing that happened in March has, like, completely derailed people,
Yes.
because it's a stressful situation. Their routine was interrupted, and they didn't have a plan in place to deal with stress. So, like, of course it's easy, it's easy at first when nothing, you're riding high, you're like, oh, this is so great, I've lost weight, I feel better, I'm not hungry all the time. And then something stressful happens, and bam, we're right back to the old behavior. So, and there's a different, people are on, like, we have this spectrum of, like, mildly disordered to severely disordered. So are there some people who did have a disordered relationship with food and they just switched to eating only meat and they seem perfectly fine? Yes, but they are a rarity. Like,
Yeah.
it's more common that, people can't stick to it because of emotional reasons, not because the diet itself is unsustainable. It's perfectly physically sustainable and healthy to eat real food.
Yes.
But when you come up against something emotionally difficult and you don't have coping mechanisms, then you go right back to the food.
Yeah, and that's what I feel like. And this whole 2020 situation has been like a big band-aid that got ripped off for people. Maybe some of those wounds were healing a little bit, but it's uncovered a lot of stress and a lot of emotional trauma for people. It's just been such a crazy time of uncertainty. So I've even myself experienced like, just wanting to just eat more. And I have gained some weight. I have not had any sugar. I haven't gone off and had any carb binges or, but I found that I gained weight because I just, I was doing everything I could to cope, but it's like, it's just a hard time, and that's one of the things we talk about in recovery is like learning how to live life on life's terms,
Mm-hmm.
and just learning how to, no matter what happens, no matter what stressor comes into your life, to not use, your drug of choice, be it food or alcohol or whatever, as a coping technique. And
Right.
that's the real emotional work. That I don't care if you're just eating nothing but beef, like, it's you have to learn how to deal with and manage with those emotions.
Yeah, if you're eating when you're not hungry, you have to look at why. Like, why am I eating? And just like there's like universal triggers that like things that like we all tend to deal with. Like, I can't tell you, I've had like countless clients tell me, that they fell off the wagon because they came home. That was a really stressful, long day. They came home, they were just too tired to cook something proper. So they just ran through the drive-through or picked up a pizza.
Mm.
So, when I work with, I work with people and they tell me something like that, I'm like, okay, well, let's look at what was the real issue. Like the most important thing to tackle was how tired and stressed you were, because, hunger is secondary in that situation. So if you're too tired to make a proper eating decision, it's not the food that needs to be addressed. It's not eating that needs to be addressed. You need rest.
Yeah.
So if you're so tired that you can't make a good eating decision, then you need to not eat and you need to go take a nap or go to bed early or whatever. When we're tired, we need rest, not food.
Yeah.
When we're stressed, we need to look at like, what's the source of my stress and what can I do to change that? And if I can't, what are some alternatives for helping me relax? Because food is only going to exacerbate our stress and our pain. It's never going to make it better. It might taste good for a couple of minutes, but after that, like I know, like those of us that are addicts, even with the first bite, our brain, that voice of sabotage is already beating us down about why, already telling us we shouldn't be doing this. And we start beating ourselves up and we let the voice of sabotage in and we start falling for, all the lies of, okay, well, this is the last time, or, just eat it all tonight. And then tomorrow you could start fresh, those things that we
Yes.
go through.
Yeah. Yeah, I always go back to HALT. I'm sure you've
Yes.
hungry, angry,
Yes.
lonely, tired.
Yes.
Before I make a decision about what I'm putting in my body, I have to do that little checklist and be
Yeah.
like, okay, where am I at on that spectrum?
Yep.
Because those are when you're very vulnerable, as you call it, the voice of sabotage, which I love because you separate yourself from from Ed, as
Yes.
you call him, from the disordered voice, as it's not my voice. This is not, something I need to listen to. This is the voice of sabotage. This is Ed trying to run the show right now.
Right, exactly. And we think we're, all this time, we think we're at war with ourselves because, I mean, one of the sneaky things about the voice of sabotage is it does speak to us in our own voice. So we think we're having this like battle of, wills with ourselves, like, the angel and the devil thing, right? Like on our shoulder, like we think we're warring with ourselves when we really are at battle with that voice of sabotage. And we're the ones with all the power. Like, the disorder, that voice of sabotage can only plant the thought. We're the one with the power to choose. It's not like, the voice comes in and, oh, we're left with no choice and we just, fall for it. We have to recognize that we do have power and that we do have a choice always.
Yeah, I love that. And, so much of what you do now, and I had Jessica on recently, you guys coach people. You have taken like probably hundreds of people through kind of your coaching where you really, you teach them about food, right? How to do
Yeah.
keto. And but the purpose of the group is, people think they're going in there for food, but what you're trying to help them really do is start to live their life, in a different way, and
Right.
find healthy emotional responses to life that don't involve putting something in your mouth. And
Right.
um,
Yeah, our group, so I mean, we work with people one-on-one, and in those one-on-one situations are where we talk about like what, we educate people on, well, what is keto? What does it mean to be in ketosis? What foods, are going to be keto friendly? What things should we avoid? The how-to keto is part of that one-on-one coaching. But in our food addiction and recovery group, we're about to start our 27th group as of the,
wow.
the time this is being recorded, and we've had like over 500 people go through the group. And it's not a how to keto group. We like don't even really talk about keto very much in the group. We completely address the steps to food sobriety. Like it's an 8-week group. So like the first 4 weeks we spend, what are the steps to food sobriety? And then the second 4 weeks is applying those steps to all the, situations that we struggle with, holidays and social situations and stressors, everyday stressors. And we talk about, how our circle of influence plays into our disordered eating. And we talk about changes in relationships. And there's so many things that can affect our eating decisions and lead us back to, using food improperly. So we methodically work our way through that. And so often people in the first week, they're like, they want to know everything. Like week 1, they have all these questions and we're just like, hang with us. Like we're going to take you through week by week. Each week builds on the last. And there's a reason we do it in the order that we do, because we just can't, you can't tackle everything in week 1, but we, want to help people identify, do they even have an eating disorder? If they do, what kind of eating disorder is it? What are your patterns? What are your danger zones? What are all the lies that we believe that the food is doing for us, and how do we address those?
That's so valuable and so helpful. And I will definitely link below this video ways that people can get into those groups and work with you, because I feel like this is the real work of, what you're doing. And it's like you said, you don't even necessarily talk about the food. I think I've talked with you and maybe also Katrina, who I've interviewed,
Mm-hmm.
that we obsess over the food and the recipes, and we obsess on that stuff, and it's like, let me just do all these recipes now, and it's like, no, you're really thinking about the wrong thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to talk to you about, you and I were kind of messaging the other night, is this myth or this thought process that's floating around in the carnivore. It's more so in the carnivore space, but a lot of keto people are kind of looking into that. But it's impossible to overeat protein, and you can't eat too much meat, and it's fine, and you're not going to gain weight. It's not going to Let's dive
So,
into
I
that.
mean, I just don't even know like where that idea comes from that you can't overeat protein. You absolutely can. So in the beginning, when we first started talking, I have a story. Like there was a time prior to keto, it was like 8 years ago. My family and I used to go to this all-you-can-eat buffet restaurant, and when we went, we would go on the days that they had all-you-can-eat steak. Because
Mhm.
I've always loved steak. Like I didn't like discover steak when I went keto and, dabbled with carnivore. I've always loved steak. So I would go there specifically to get steak, mushrooms, and onions. And then of course, unlimited dinner rolls. And I would sample all the desserts and just stuff myself silly. It was like it was go time, binge time. And the last time that I ate there, I ate 9 steaks.
Wow.
So you cannot tell me that you cannot overeat on meat, because I sure as heck did. And Jessica, she talks about this. She was, Atkins for several years, and she binged on bacon and eggs.
Yeah.
Like, because that was all she could eat. So what do she's trying to stay in the parameters of Atkins, right? So she just binged on bacon and eggs. So I don't know I think people that say that don't really know, they don't have an eating disorder.
No.
They don't feel, they don't compulsively eat. They've never binged. They don't understand. and they can't relate. And I think that, in the, like, dietitian, nutritionist space, and even with doctors, like, I don't want to sound like I'm bashing people. I think they're well-intentioned. Like,
Yes.
they want to help people. They have good intentions, but the problem is their information is wrong, and they don't know what it's like to have an eating disorder.
Yeah.
I, over the years, went to countless professionals, and I was always like told the same thing, just eat in moderate. Yeah, you can have the dessert, but just have one, not more than once a week. Make sure you exercise, do this, like eat, healthy grains, have a salad, all this stuff. That is not helpful
Yeah.
at all. It's not helpful. And I know, I love the stories of, because there are definitely people in the space who are nutritionists, and they are doctors, and they learned from their own experience that the advice they were doling out was wrong, because when they developed their own problem, they tried to apply their own advice, and lo and behold, oh, this isn't working. Maybe my patients and my clients aren't liars. Like, maybe they really are, trying to follow the rules, and it doesn't work. Like, I always tried to follow the rules and follow a diet to a T. The problem was that it was so unsatisfying physically. I could not get satiated. I constantly felt hungry.
Mm-hmm.
I used the word hungry, but I know now, looking back, that I was constantly craving. I wasn't constantly hungry. I was constantly craving. And the reason was because of what I was eating.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, changing over what we eat to things that are more nutrient dense and satisfying makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I agree. But it's just like it's not the only factor in the equation if you do have an eating disorder. Like you mentioned, at some point a big stressor is going to come up in your life. Something will happen, and that part of your brain that is looking for a quick and easy coping mechanism will say, let's eat. And I've seen people do it in the carnivore diet, that they'll go and they'll just binge on meat. They'll go and eat 4 or 5 pounds of meat, and then we're like, oh, it's fine, you can't eat too much meat. And then that starts to kind of become a habit or a thing they do, and they're like, why do I feel terrible? Why am I gaining weight? I thought this was kind of like this thing where you couldn't overdo it, and it,
Right.
and
It's
like,
not a free for all. Like,
no.
but we all have that. Like, we desperately want to believe that, because like our entire lives, when we've been inundated with like all the diet rules and the dogma and stuff. And there's been several programs that I personally have been through where there's like a list of free foods, right? Well,
Yes. Oh God. 0 points.
Yeah, 0 points. But that's just not true. We have to be mindful of what we eat. And unfortunately, those of us that have struggled with our weight and our hormones being out of balance, and, being obese, like, so many people don't know what real, actual, true hunger is. They haven't experienced that. And you can experience that. And it takes a while. Like, in most cases, it takes years to really learn what true hunger and satisfaction is. And, I work on that with clients, and, but it takes a while to get there. It's a process, but we definitely aren't going to get there if, we're only focused on, oh, look, I can eat all the meat I want and not have consequences.
Right.
And that's just not true. We see it all the time. We've seen people in the space, gain weight on keto and carnivore. We've seen them drop out. We've seen them come back, then they show up like a year later. Oh, I've gained 80 pounds and I'm back. And we see that happen repeatedly because people aren't addressing the real issue, which is, why am I overeating to begin with? What do I believe this food is doing for me? It really doesn't do anything for, like, we say we use food to cope. How many people say, I'm an emotional eater? Like, are we all, right? Like, we're emotional eater, but it doesn't change our situation. I had a client one time tell me, like, she had gotten a flat tire, and she was so stressed about it that she went off, like, I can't remember what it was, but basically she went off keto because she was stressed about the flat tire. And so I asked her, like, after, like, okay, so, and after the binge, was your tire still flat?
Right.
Like, what is that? What did that? There was like no, she made a connection there, like, but there's no connection. Like going on a binge does nothing to change your situation. You still have to deal with the flat tire or the cat barf or, you
Yeah.
know, pets dying. Like there's so many reasons why we eat, right? But eating doesn't change any of it. It
No.
doesn't make our stressful day go away. It doesn't, you know, bring our loved ones back. It doesn't, you know, fix our car that had to go to the shop. Like it doesn't fix any of that. But people, for some reason, think that eating is a solution to these situations.
It's terrifying to think like that you would have this big problem, right? And then think eating is going to somehow help. And for me, when I go back to the problem, usually it's worse,
Yes.
and it helped
It's even
absolutely
harder
nothing.
to deal with
Yeah.
because it's still there. And now we feel like crap physically and emotionally because, you know, Ed starts beating up on us the minute we go, we go do the thing we said we weren't going to do, right? Like how many times do we wake up in the morning? Today's the day, okay? And then by noon or 4 o'clock, we're done. And Ed's already like, you loser, you
Yeah.
didn't do what you said you were going to do. May as well eat it all now.
Yeah.
Go full, go whole hog because you blew it already.
Yeah. It's like Groundhog Day. That's what I always liken addiction to. It's just like every day you wake up, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. And then like 9 o'clock, it's on. And yeah, it's like getting on the back of a runaway train.
Yeah.
You just don't know when the train's going to stop, if the train's going to stop, it's just so unpredictable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if I could say like to people, because there's so many in this space, we get people throwing information at us and talking about things. We were talking about this before the call. If what you are doing is working for you, if you're feeling better, if you're getting results, if your pants are getting smaller, your health markers are improving, and you are, feeling good, it shouldn't matter what any like influencer, doctor, nutritionist, your favorite person on social media, whatever, it doesn't matter like what any of them say. But so often like people are having, they're getting results and then they throw away their own evidence based on what somebody else said. Naysayers too. Like we've seen it, like people are doing great and then their doctor tells them, oh, don't do keto, that's dangerous. They're there at the doctor's office with improved health markers, weight loss, they've reduced their diabetes medication, and then the doctor's like, well, what are you doing? And people make the mistake of using the K word. I call it the K word. They say the K word. And then the doctor is like, oh my God, no, you can't do that. That's not healthy. Even though everything is better at this doctor visit, right?
Right.
So I tell people, like, don't ignore your own evidence because of what somebody is saying to you, including your doctor. And also don't use the K word at the doctor's office. If they ask what you're doing, say, I'm eating real food. What doctor to say that's dangerous?
Yeah. And I feel like sometimes people are in our own families, in our own lives, and because of 2020, we don't necessarily have to deal with this situation as much, but we go around people during holidays or family gatherings and they can see a huge change in us. And then we like tell them what we've been doing and they completely lose their mind and talk about how they know nothing about this way of eating. They haven't done the same research that you have done and study and dedication, yet they think it's the most dangerous thing in the world. And they'll try to talk you out of it, even though you're like, they're telling you how great you look, it's, yeah.
Their paradigm is what, it is for most of it. It's very difficult to make that paradigm shift. I know when I first started keto, like I really was very skeptical. I thought it was ridiculous. And when my friend told me about it, I thought he was joking when he said I could lose weight eating high fat, because at that time, my mindset was fat makes you fat. Like I'm fat because I obviously eat fatty foods, right?
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult to make that paradigm switch and to realize that everything we've been doing is wrong. And for a lot of people, they have that cognitive dissonance because in order for them to, like, some people nobody wants to be like, look like a fool, right? So I forget exactly how the saying goes, but like, it's easier for people to believe a lie than to believe they've been lied to, because being lied to and believing it makes us look like a fool, right? So it's better to just like, oh, we're going to stick with this is right information, and we keep going along doing this, believing the same lie, and then nothing ever changes. But we have to make that switch, and we have to look at food differently. And I mean, that's been part of my healing, is seeing the food for what it is. And so many people think that, when I say stuff like this, it's extreme, and perhaps maybe it is, but it's what's helped me. But I have to look at sugar and inflammatory foods and foods that compel me to want to keep eating that as poison for me.
Yeah.
Like I am, like I'm not going to eat rat poison, and I have cupcakes in that same category, which, I know that makes people crazy, but they're both going to harm me.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's the other thing I wanted to ask you about, because I've seen you kind of talk with people on Instagram, just kind of get into it a little bit with people. People usually are coming onto your page, unsolicited and like attacking. And there's this whole movement now of, like health at every size and fat acceptance. And we're like anti-diet culture. I've had this argument within my own family, because I have some overweight people in my family who look at what I'm doing and saying that I'm still being ruled by diet culture. And I'm like, no, that's not what this is. So what is I know that's kind of a loaded,
it is. It's like, there's no right answer to this.
Yeah, I know. It's a tough one. I put you on the spot with that.
That's okay. No, I mean, this is one of the things, like I think that being body positive is great. Like, I think there's a part of that movement that we should definitely embrace. We should be body positive. That is like one of, 6.5 years in, like the food is not a struggle for me at this point. My biggest struggle in relation to, that voice of sabotage in my disordered brain is body image and the way that I see myself. And so I think it is important. We should embrace where we're at. And we shouldn't talk negatively about ourselves and about our bodies. Like, I think that we should practice like looking at our bodies and talking about the things that we like. But I also don't think it is, and this is the part that'll get me in trouble, I don't think that it's healthy to be obese. Like, of course, love yourself where you're at. You can't, you cannot hate yourself into a place of health, right? Like, you can't hate your body so much and then let that hate for your body fuel you into a healthy situation. You're still going to be disordered, and you'll probably never like your body if that's how you're going into it. So yes, like, embrace where you're at, but love yourself enough to get healthy. Like, that's where like the love yourself thing comes in. Like, don't love yourself to death by continuing to binge eat because, F you diet culture,
Yes.
like that's what people are like screw diet, screw that. And then they're eating themselves into an early death, and they're going to end up with diabetes or heart, like they're going to end up with health ailments.
Yeah.
So, yes, treat yourself kindly and embrace the body that you have, but also love yourself enough to get healthy. Like, it's not healthy to continue binging and, being 400 pounds.
Yeah. And this is what what I think about this movement is that a lot of the people in the movement are under 40,
Yeah.
And from what I've seen is that when you're obese, that you don't necessarily, some people do start having health problems very young, and they're kind of like pathologized, like the asthma or the joint pain and the bloating and the problems with digestion. But once you hit 40, that's when you're going to start having those more serious problems like diabetes and heart trouble. And
right. Well, it's interesting too, like what people consider health, because there are young people who are like, they see being unhealthy as something like more severe, but you have these younger people who are like, well, I'm overweight and I'm totally healthy, and then they go on to list their problems. I have asthma.
Yes.
I have an autoimmune, blah, blah, blah. And they just describe themselves as healthy. They're not like making the connection that healthy means like no issues, like you don't have any diseases, you're not having pains, you're not inflamed, you're not but people, they don't recognize like what actually being unhealthy means. Like, if you're 300 pounds and you wake up with joint pain, and you don't sleep well or you snore, you have health issues.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I feel like a lot of the time it's like kind of a ticking time bomb. It's gonna, once you get older, I think it will start manifesting as other issues from what I've seen, just from like a person walking around and talking and having a human experience. That's what I see. So it is a really tough topic because, yeah, I'm with you. Like, I lost 100 pounds. It's been over 12 years ago. So for the last 12 years, I've had all kinds of body image issues and body dysmorphia. And people will look at me and be like, you look great. What are you talking about? And it's like this still the voice in my head that's like, you're not good enough. You're not thin enough. You should look better. And it's like, I'm 41. I'm not 25 anymore. And you just, it's
Yeah.
a continual thing. So I love the body positivity and loving yourself and accepting yourself, but we can't just turn a blind eye to health, you know?
I agree. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm going to be 49 next week, and I still have like this is like the thing that bugs me. I just still have like this issue where I don't see myself the way others see me. And I know that that's hard for people like that are in a different place than we are. Cause I can remember being 260 pounds and getting really irritated with people who were like 130 pounds who didn't like their body. Like,
Yes. I'm same. Yeah.
yeah, and so like now, like I sometimes hesitate to like talk about my struggles, even though I want to. I want to be open about that because I think that people can relate. But every time I do, there's always people that come along that are like, "You look great. You don't need a tummy tuck." Blah blah blah. Like, and they give me tons of compliments, which is great. But that's not where. I mean, the compliments are only like, they're nice in the moment, but they don't help me change, my view of myself. That has to like be, that process has to be like internal. But I know like I've been like on the other side and like, feeling frustrated,
Yeah.
but it doesn't matter. Like I think we all think, like, how many times have we heard, or we ourselves have said, well, when I lose 100 pounds or when I'm this size, then I'll be happy.
Yeah.
No,
It
nobody
never
won't.
works. It
Nobody
never
won't.
happens.
There are thin, gorgeous women everywhere who are not happy with their body.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to just keep saying that. So it's like along the way, learning to love yourself regardless. And, you know, I feel like it takes a lifetime, but it's also just a one day at a time process as
Right.
well. you know
Yeah.
well, I wanted to talk to you one more topic because I feel like we could talk for 3 hours, but I don't know if my YouTube audience will necessarily watch 3 hours. But one thing I really want to talk to you about is this whole idea of intuitive eating, because that's another hot topic. And I'm just, almost 2 years in here with no sugar, no carbs, nothing. I still feel like I'm super far away from being able to eat intuitively.
I think it takes a while, and it's something that we like always have to work on, because we are trained from a very young age. Like we only kids who aren't offered meals on a schedule eat intuitively. Like if you've got a 2-year-old and you don't offer that child food, like, all day, like the child will come and tell you when they'll tell you that they're hungry if you don't offer food, right? But we, from a young age, we're conditioned to like eat by a clock. Look at like the universal meal times: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If you go to a restaurant at 5:30, 6 o'clock, it's packed. You have to wait an hour to be seated, right? In normal times, right?
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
wait an hour to be seated. Is it because everybody is hungry at that time, or that we've been conditioned to show up and eat at 6 o'clock?
Yeah.
Like, so we, like, even people that are normal eaters do that. Like, they're disordered on a very mild scale in the fact that they eat by a clock. They don't overeat when they eat, but they still maybe eat by a clock. So this is like a lifetime of undoing. It's not something you can, start keto or carnivore and like 3 months later, hey, yeah, I just eat when I'm hungry. Like, it takes a long time
Yeah.
to discover that, and a lot of like trial and error. And I think, a lot of experimenting, but it is possible. And when I think one of the biggest keys is having our hormones out, combined with tackling the emotional reasons we eat. If we're not eating for emotional reasons, then we could probably trust our body to tell us when we're hungry.
Yeah.
that whole leptin, ghrelin, I can never pronounce that thing, has a factor in there too. But like, it's definitely something that we have to learn. It's not easy to be an intuitive eater, and we have to, like, I think tracking initially, like, helps us. Because we can see, we can look and go, okay, how satisfied do I feel today? And like, well, what did I eat? What did it take? And then I think, like, each time we, are thinking that we need to eat, if we stop and evaluate, am I really like, how urgent is my hunger right now? Am I really feeling hungry, or do I have to eat, or can I wait?
Yeah.
And if it's like, okay, I don't have to eat, then okay, I'm going to wait. And doing stuff like that will really help us, fix that signaling to where we can tell, like, when we're really truly hungry.
Yeah, I think it's so tough because so many of us come from these disordered eating backgrounds where we've restricted and then we've gone on the binge and then we've just, so I feel like for me, I've just messed up my own hunger signaling, and
Yeah.
that it's just taking a long time for that to kind of happen. So I do track, and I get a lot of flack for that. People are like, that's stupid. Don't track.
Cool.
It's like, I kind of want to know, like, how much I need to eat, and so I don't blow it way over or go way under, just to make sure I'm sustaining my body and nourishing my body. And for me, it's a form of self-care,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, tracking is a great tool, and we can learn a lot from it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not something that I want to do like the rest of my life.
Right.
I happen to be tracking right now because I'm, working with a coach on specific goals. So it's a tool I'm using right now, but I don't plan on doing that forever. Like, let's face it, sometimes it's like aggravating.
Yeah, it is. It's like, oh man, I got to put this in my calculator. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm going to put all of your links and everything below, but tell people where they can find you, and if they want to work with you, how they would go about doing that.
Okay, well, on Instagram and Facebook, I'm Keto Mary 71. And then the website for coaching is ketogeniclifestylecoaching.com. And we also, Ketogenic Lifestyle Coaching has a page on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Cool. Well, I'll link all that below, and as well as our previous interview, because I think people will want to go back and watch that also. But thank you so much for talking about this stuff. I feel like it's so important, and you're one of the people that I always look to, because I know you just have this heart where you really want to help people. So I just really appreciate you so much.
Well, thank you so much. I love everything that you do. You put so much information out there and different points of view. So it's been really, like, great to watch. And thank you for having me back. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again.